Enjoy reading the story on Manga Funny channel.
On a beautiful evening when everyone had fallen asleep, there was a strange noise. Suddenly, the only sound in the peaceful darkness was someone's heavy breathing. At this moment, a strong and beautiful young woman opened her eyes wide, only to find herself staring directly into the gaze of someone watching her. A man with a sharp nose and a smooth forehead, resembling an ancient statue, was looking at her. This man was Grand Duke Lodovica. He was the emperor's nephew and a heroic warrior, the strongest swordsman on the continent and the leader of the Black Dragon Knights, of which she was also a member. There was quite a long story behind why such an extraordinary man was lying next to her in the middle of the night like this. Do you want to know why? He is using his subordinate as a pillow, of all things. Suddenly, he pinned her arms down, and she screamed.
What kind of weird hobby is this?
She thought to herself how heavy he was.
I have no other choice, I'll have to deal with him the hard way,
she thought, exhausted from cleaning her grumpy boss's office all day. Maybe a gentle pat could calm him down. Finally, she managed to free herself from his grip. But unexpectedly, his hand caught her wig. At that moment, she considered quitting the Black Dragon Knights once and for all. He gripped tighter, but she quickly slipped away. As she ran to the door, she glanced back to see his reaction and thought to herself that they would never meet again. She then ran quickly, disappearing into the night. At that moment, she silently thanked everything up to that point. Meanwhile, he stood on the balcony, watching her small figure fade into the night and thinking.
Will we really never meet again?
He quietly thought. Very well. We'll wait and see if that's truly the case.
The story begins. In the Brabner family, there were two daughters. The Count and Countess raised their daughters like precious gems. The older sister, Grace, was wise and expected to inherit the family legacy. The younger sister, Sasha, was free-spirited and a master of swordsmanship, highly skilled and knowledgeable in the art of the sword. Though they lost their mother at an early age, their father loved them dearly and raised them without lacking anything. Therefore, she had no doubts that the future of the two sisters would be filled with happiness. But things did not go as expected. When she was 13 years old, everything changed when her father suddenly passed away on a rainy day. She still couldn't believe she had lost both her parents. Her older sister comforted her, but what shocked her more than being left alone with her sister was that they were now inside the world of a novel. And this novel did not have a happy ending. Next came the death of her beloved sister, the story's main character. At this point, she immediately thought of the romance novel she once loved the most. It was a short story summarizing Grace's life. In the novel, the male lead, a commoner knight named Ethan, was deeply loved by the female lead, Grace. They dreamed of overcoming their differences in status to be together. However, after the tragic death of their father, the story took a more heartbreaking turn than ever before. Grace, the elder sister of the family, chose a political marriage with an old nobleman instead of being with her lover. Ethan, to protect their love like a knight, could only watch from afar as the woman he loved made her choice, his heart breaking. After these events, he silently volunteered for a distant conquest mission. After a long time, all Grace received was the news that her former lover Ethan had died. Overcoming her grief, Grace followed him into the afterlife. The story ended there, a tale with no happy ending. Sasha was still crying, comforted by her sister, who promised to protect her. She hugged her sister tightly. In her mind at that moment, a thought suddenly came. What if this is the world of a novel? But the warmth of my sister's embrace felt very real. Not like something from a novel. Everything started after my sister's father passed away not long after that. My sister hadn't even gotten married yet, and Ethan hadn't left to join his conquest mission. There was still a chance to change the future for the two of them. She thought she would ensure her sister didn't end up in a political marriage, so her sister could be with the love she was denied in the original story. She was determined to change the outcome of this touching story. But no, another failure struck. One day at the swordsmanship training ground. For years had passed since she decided to change the future, but she still hadn't been able to do anything. She had tried many different methods, but all had failed. Sasha's plan to change the storyline was as follows. First, she would tell her sister about the future, so her sister could view it like a silly letter. But that failed. Then, she tried to provide financial support through the mines mentioned in the original story, but they were already owned by someone else. Failed again. And countless other efforts followed, but all failed for various reasons. Still, she truly believed this time it would work and bring a good result. In the end, the family's wealth had drastically declined, and at some point, Ethan stopped visiting her sister. She trained furiously in swordsmanship. For years had passed. What should I do to change the future? This question always lingered in her mind. Suddenly, a very familiar voice calling her name broke the stillness. A handsome young man appeared and asked what she was doing there. It was Johann, from the Albrecht family. He came from a famous family of swordsmen, the Albrecht Marquessate, and was Sasha's childhood friend. Johann's father was her godfather and also her swordsmanship teacher. She often trained in swordsmanship at Johann's house, in their training yard. She ran over to Johann and asked why he was there. He replied that he had come to visit her, and since this was his home's yard. Her voice was full of surprise.
Visit me? Why?
In fact, he had heard that Lady Grace and Duke Hermann had discussed marriage between them. She panicked and asked,
What? Where did you hear that?
He replied that he heard it from his own father. The Albrecht family was very skilled at gathering information, which everyone knew. In her mind, she immediately thought,
If Johann knows about it too, it means it's about to happen.
Johann asked suspiciously, What's going on?
No matter how hard she had tried over the past 4 years, she still couldn't change the original story. If this happens, she has no other choice. She thought she'd have to send that old Duke straight to the other world, she said while drawing her sword, her gaze steady. Johann beside her immediately shouted, Do you think that will work? He lunged to grab the sword and yelled, Do you really think my father taught us swordsmanship for something like this? Sasha asked Johann, Are you planning to just stand by and watch my sister marry that man? At this point, Johann handed the sword back to her and asked her to calm down. His parents were doing everything they could to prevent this marriage, and he thought they would continue trying. No matter how much power the old man had in the political world, the age gap was just too much. 80 years old. Yes, my sister's future husband is the old Duke Hermann, a man who could force my family into a marriage. He plays an important role in the current political world, and he's also the father-in-law of the current emperor. Honestly, she didn't care who her sister married as long as she was happy. But it couldn't be the old Duke. Anyone but him. And since her sister still hadn't talked to her about it, it seemed like her sister had already made up her mind. She thought her sister had made up her mind. At this moment, Ethan asked Sasha, Should I talk to her and tell her that continuing with this marriage is a bad idea? Sasha turned and replied, My sister never changes her decision once she's made up her mind. You know that, right? Suddenly, she thought. Ethan is always soft when it comes to her. She brightened up and exclaimed. Yes. That might work. We just need Ethan to convince her to change her mind. He's the only one who can stop her. Johan thought to himself. There you go with your wild ideas again. But to meet Ethan, she would have to go see the Black Dragon Knights at the Grand Duke's estate. A few years ago, Ethan had joined the Black Dragon Knights under Grand Duke Ludovica to earn prestigious titles. Grand Duke Ludovica was Johan's father's apprentice. If she used that connection, she might be able to get into the Grand Duke's estate. Not only Johan, but she too might be able to get inside. She asked Johan, "You have some business with the Black Dragon Knights, don't you?" He replied, "Actually, I have to meet the Grand Duke next week." "Why are you asking?" She excitedly leaned toward Johan and asked him to take her with him. Before Johan could understand what was going on, she said, "Yes, we can't waste any more time." She thought to herself that this was the only plan left. The final campaign was to have Ethan personally persuade her sister. This time, she would change her sister's future. But at that moment, because she was so consumed by the hope of saving her sister, she forgot one important thing. She would be going to meet the Black Dragon Knights, where the madman Grand Duke, the strongest man in the world, resided. And what will happen next? Stay tuned for the next episode.